My friends, you can have papers signed, cameras flashing, hands shaking, but peace, real peace, doesn't come from a podium. It comes from principle. It comes from people with courage. It comes from discipline stronger than emotion and vision greater than vengeance. So here we are again. Missiles are flying when they shouldn't be. Promises are breaking before the ink even dries. And we ask ourselves, why, when there's a path to silence the guns, does someone still reach for the trigger? Why does peace feel like a temporary pause between storms instead of the end of them? Because true peace requires more than diplomacy. It requires transformation. You see, any fool can start a war. But it takes wisdom to prevent one. It takes a backbone not made of steel, but of soul. And it takes leaders, men and women, not obsessed with power, but possessed by purpose. People can't sleep while sirens scream. Children don't dream when bombs light up the night sky. This isn't just a headline. This is a human life multiplied by millions, and we can't get numb to it. We can't turn the page just because it's happening over there. The pain over there eventually finds its way here. Hate travels, fire spreads, and you better believe actions speak louder than negotiations. Now some will justify it. Say it's retaliation, defense, pride, prophecy. But behind every reason is a result. And the result is always the same: graves dug, trust broken, humanity wounded. We live in a world where the fuse is short and the explosions are global, where a decision made in darkness can light up a sky we never wanted to see burn. So the question isn't what happened. We know what happened. The question is, what are we going to do about it? We're going to rise above reaction. We're going to call for something better, not out of weakness, but out of strength. Not because we're afraid to fight, but because we're brave enough not to. The truth is, peace takes more guts than war. You want to flex power, show the world you can stop a fight before it starts. You want legacy, build something no missile can destroy. You want change, be the fire that refines, not the one that consumes. Because at the end of the day, when the dust settles and the noise fades, history doesn't remember who shouted the loudest. It remembers who stood the tallest. True peace demands transformation, not just treaties. It's easy to sign a document, to pose for photographs, to shake hands under the flash of cameras, and declare the world a safer place. But those moments, while symbolic, are not solutions in themselves. A treaty might stop the weapons for a moment, but it doesn't stop the war inside people's hearts. It doesn't dissolve the decades of hatred, suspicion, and trauma that have taken root deep within communities, cultures, and countries. Peace is not a pause in conflict. It is a shift in how we see one another, how we value life, how we respond to disagreement, and how we interpret strength. Transformation is a process, not an event. It takes time. It takes humility. It takes a willingness to look in the mirror, not just at the enemy, but at ourselves. It demands that we challenge the beliefs that led us to violence in the first place, and ask whether those beliefs were rooted in truth or merely in fear, pride, or pain. Treaties are written with ink, but transformation is written on the soul. You can't legislate empathy. You can't pass a resolution that makes people trust each other. That kind of work happens in schools, in homes, in neighborhoods, in places where people from different backgrounds choose to talk instead of shout, to listen instead of accuse. That's the soil where peace grows, and it's not glamorous. It doesn't get headlines, but it's the only way peace ever lasts. Without transformation, a treaty is a countdown to the next missile. Without healing, a ceasefire is just a breath between screams. You can sign all the papers you want, but if the people who sign them go back to teaching hate, justifying violence, and preparing for revenge, then nothing has changed. The gun may be quiet, but the war is still breathing. That's why transformation matters. That's why peace that comes from the inside out is stronger than peace imposed from the outside in. True peace confronts injustice instead of covering it. It doesn't ask people to forget what happened. It invites them to forgive. It doesn't pretend wounds don't exist. It helps heal them. It doesn't silence anger. It gives it direction. Transformation turns pain into purpose. It refuses to let bitterness become identity. It calls people higher, not because they have to, but because they see that there is a better way. That kind of peace is powerful because it doesn't depend on politicians or paperwork. It lives in the choices ordinary people make every day. It lives in how we speak about those who are different from us. It lives in how we treat the stranger, the rival, the forgotten. Peace that is transformed is peace that is tested, refined, and made real in fire. It's not weak, it's not soft, it's not naive. It's the hardest thing in the world because it means surrendering the right to hate, even when hate feels justified. Transformation also means accountability. You can't have real peace without truth. The truth has to come to the surface. What was done, who was harmed, what systems allowed it. These things can't be buried. They must be brought into the light. But transformation means we don't just point fingers. We also take responsibility. We examine our own roles, our silence, our ignorance, our blind spots. That's how we build something that lasts. That's how we build a world where the next generation doesn't inherit the wars of their parents. Peace that comes from transformation is proactive. It doesn't wait for bombs to fall to start the conversation. It works while the world sleeps. It builds bridges while others build barriers. It prepares minds and hearts for unity, even when circumstances scream division. You can't rush transformation. You can't microwave peace. It requires deep work, painful reflection, and constant commitment. And not everyone wants it. Some profit from chaos. Some fear what peace would ask of them. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means it's rare. Rare things are worth fighting for. Peace that's only written in treaties can be erased with a single act of betrayal. But peace that's written in character, in community, in conviction, that kind of peace is resilient. It weathers the storm, it survives the test, it grows stronger in adversity because it's not just a strategy, it's a way of life. True peace transforms not only nations, but individuals, families, and futures. It doesn't just stop the violence, it redefines what victory means. It challenges us to measure power not by how many enemies we defeat, but by how many we choose to understand, to forgive, to reconcile with. Peace that endures demands something deeper than promises. It demands transformation that touches the very soul of a people, a culture, a generation. Leadership rooted in purpose is stronger than leadership driven by power. Purpose is the compass that guides decisions when the road gets dark, when the noise is deafening, when the pressure is overwhelming. Power alone can move armies, but purpose moves hearts. Power can silence people, but purpose gives them a voice. When a leader leads with purpose, their authority doesn't come from their title, their office, or their weapons. It comes from the clarity of their conviction, the consistency of their character, and the courage to choose what is right even when it's unpopular. A leader with purpose is dangerous not because they seek control, but because they refuse to be controlled by fear, by ego, by greed, or by vengeance. They are steady in storms because they aren't chasing headlines, they're answering a call. Leadership without purpose is loud but shallow. It postures instead of serves. It reacts instead of responds. It calculates instead of cares. It's always chasing something. Approval, power, survival. But it never stands still long enough to lead with vision. You see, power is seductive. It promises control, but it delivers chaos when it becomes the end goal. A leader addicted to power may win battles but lose their soul. They may build an empire but destroy the very people they were meant to protect. But a leader grounded in purpose doesn't need to dominate to lead. They don't need to threaten to be strong. Their strength is internal. Their foundation is invisible but unshakable. Purpose asks different questions than power. Power asks, how can I win? Purpose asks, who am I serving? Power asks, how do I look? Purpose asks, what difference am I making? Power demands loyalty. Purpose earns trust. When a leader is guided by purpose, they see beyond the moment. They're not interested in quick victories if it means compromising long-term values. They're not interested in applause if it drowns out accountability. Their decisions reflect something bigger than themselves. Their actions are tethered to meaning. Even when they fail forward because their goal was never perfection. It was impact. In times of crisis, the difference between power and purpose becomes painfully clear. Power rushes to the microphone, but purpose listens before it speaks. Power seeks blame, but purpose seeks solutions. Power sees enemies to destroy. Purpose sees people to protect. Power often escalates conflict to maintain its image. Purpose de-escalates it to maintain human dignity. That kind of leadership isn't weak, it's revolutionary. It doesn't fold under pressure, it leans into the pressure with focus and grace. People may not always agree with a leader who walks in purpose, but they can't ignore them. They command a different kind of respect, not because they demand it, but because they live it. Their consistency earns it. Their actions confirm it. They do the hard work when no one's watching. They tell the truth when lying would be easier. They build what will last long after their term, their reign, or their influence ends. They lead with legacy in mind, not just leverage. They understand that leadership isn't about being in charge, it's about taking responsibility. A purpose-driven leader doesn't weaponize fear, they calm it. They don't divide to conquer, they unite to overcome. They don't thrive on chaos. They create clarity. They may walk through darkness, but they carry light. And people follow them not because they're forced to, but because they're inspired to. Purpose awakens loyalty that fear could never produce. It creates culture, not just compliance. It creates momentum, not just mandate. True leadership doesn't hide behind slogans, ceremonies, or shows of force. It steps into difficult conversations, complex histories, and painful truths. It doesn't run from accountability, it welcomes it. It doesn't manipulate emotions, it honors them. Power sees leadership as a throne. Purpose sees it as a trust. One can be taken, the other must be earned every single day. The greatest leaders in history weren't those who ruled the longest or shouted the loudest. They were those who sacrificed for something greater than themselves. They were those who led with empathy, vision, and grit. In the face of conflict, when missiles fly and tensions boil, the world doesn't need more powerful leaders. It needs purposeful ones, leaders who understand the cost of every decision, leaders who don't speak in the language of destruction, but in the language of dignity. Leaders who don't just say what's easy, but do what is necessary. Leadership without purpose is a ticking time bomb. It might command attention, but it can't command peace. Only purpose can do that. Only purpose can stand in the fire and still choose healing over hate. Only purpose can lift people higher when everything around them is falling apart. Only purpose can transform a moment into a movement and a position into a calling. Every act of aggression has a human cost that transcends borders. War doesn't care about nationality, ideology, or language when it strikes. It breaks homes, ends lives, and leaves scars that stretch across generations. A missile doesn't ask who you voted for. It doesn't differentiate between soldier and civilian, between guilty and innocent. It simply explodes, leaving devastation in its wake. And behind every statistic is a story, a mother, a child, a dream that will never be fulfilled. These are not just geopolitical consequences. They are human tragedies multiplied endlessly by decisions made far from the front lines. Too often, leaders see conflict in terms of strategy, territory, and leverage. forgetting that each move on the chessboard costs real lives, tears real families apart, and plants seeds of pain that can grow into future wars. The impact of violence is never contained to one side. It ripples, it reaches, it stains the conscience of all who witness it and remains in the soil, in the air, in the memories of those who survive. Aggression might be launched in the name of justice or retaliation or defense, but its consequences do not end where the missile lands. When a bomb is dropped in one country, fear spreads in another. When buildings fall in one city, hearts break in cities thousands of miles away. When lives are lost in silence, anger brews in the minds of people who feel forgotten. The myth that violence is local and limited is just that, a myth. In our global world, nothing truly stays contained. Emotion travels, trauma migrates, hatred crosses oceans. And the child who watches their home be destroyed today may grow up carrying that pain, that rage, that hunger for revenge into a future that could have been different had someone chosen peace instead. The human cost isn't just in lives lost. It's in futures erased. It's in the boy who never learns to read because his school was reduced to rubble. It's in the girl who never feels safe again because her village was caught in the crossfire. It's in the elderly man who carries the grief of watching his family disappear. These aren't abstractions. These are the real, lived experiences of war. The grief is not measured only by body counts. It is measured in broken minds, in shattered communities, in displaced families who carry their trauma like luggage with no destination in sight. The pain doesn't end when the weapons fall silent. It lingers in the air like smoke, suffocating generations long after the final shot is fired. Every time a nation chooses aggression over dialogue, escalation over diplomacy, it is making a statement about what it values most. And if that value is power at the expense of people, then the cost will always be too high. You can rebuild cities, but you cannot replace lives. You can redraw borders, but you cannot rewind time. You can justify violence in the halls of government, but you cannot justify it to a mother kneeling beside the ruins of her child's bedroom. Aggression is not just an action, it's a theft. It robs people of safety, of identity, of hope. And when those things are gone, the cycle continues. Wounded people often wound others. Hurt does not heal in isolation. It festers unless met with compassion, truth, and reconciliation. The damage done by aggression isn't always visible. There are no headlines for the child who stops speaking. There is no broadcast for the father who walks through life numb with grief. There is no trending topic for the culture that forgets how to laugh. But these are the costs that matter most. These are the costs that last. And while leaders might sit at tables and debate tactics, the people feel the consequences in the most intimate, painful ways imaginable. Peace isn't about avoiding conflict for the sake of appearances. It's about honoring the worth of every human life enough to make hard choices that protect it. When we talk about war, about missile strikes, about retaliation, we cannot let the conversation stay cold and calculated. We must bring the human being back into the picture. Because the moment we lose sight of the human cost, we open the door to justify anything. And once that door is open, it is very hard to close. Peace demands imagination, imagination to see the face of the other, to hear their cries, to believe that their suffering matters as much as our own. Every act of aggression diminishes that possibility. Every act of aggression silences a voice that might have spoken reconciliation. Every act of aggression writes another chapter in a story of pain that refuses to end because no one had the courage to stop writing it. Wisdom and restraint are the highest forms of strength. In a world that rewards reaction, that praises loud responses, and that equates noise with authority, it takes a different kind of courage to pause, to consider, to choose the higher road. When tensions rise and threats fly from every direction, The easy thing is to match fire with fire, word with word, blow with blow. But wisdom doesn't chase the easy thing. Wisdom slows the pulse, clears the fog, and sees beyond the moment. It understands that every action has a consequence, and every decision builds or breaks the future. Restraint is not weakness. It is discipline forged in experience and sharpened by clarity. It is the ability to master the storm within before trying to calm the storm outside. Strength is not proven by how quickly one can retaliate. It is proven by how deeply one can reflect before reacting. A leader with true strength is not the one who rushes into conflict with fists clenched, but the one who walks into the fire with eyes wide open and a mind anchored in truth. Restraint does not mean passivity, it means strategy. It means understanding the long game. It means knowing that some battles are won not in the arena of aggression, but in the quiet chambers of deliberation. In a time where outrage is currency and provocation is sport, those who show restraint rise above the chaos, unshaken by the pressure to respond in kind. Wisdom asks the questions that power often ignores. What will this cost? Who will suffer? What are the unintended consequences? What legacy are we leaving behind? It is easy to talk of justice while lighting the match. It is harder to carry the responsibility of peace, to bear the weight of knowing that restraint today might spare generations tomorrow. The one who restrains their hand when provoked shows mastery not just over others, but over themselves. That is the strength few understand and even fewer admire, because its rewards are not immediate, but they are lasting. The world often misunderstands restraint. It is misread as hesitation, misinterpreted as fear, and mocked as indecision. But in reality, it is the mark of someone who understands their power deeply enough not to misuse it. A wise person knows that their strength is not in how quickly they can strike, but in how carefully they can think. Their strength lies in choosing when not to strike at all. That kind of leadership creates peace without ever having to shout. It builds security without ever needing to threaten. It builds trust because it acts with intention, not impulse. Restraint is hard because it goes against instinct. When hurt, the instinct is to hurt back. When threatened, the instinct is to defend with force. But wisdom teaches that instincts must be examined. It reminds us that there is a difference between reacting and responding. Reactions come from fear, from pride, from insecurity. Responses come from strength, from clarity, from calm. The space between reaction and response is where wisdom lies, and in that space, the most powerful leaders make their most important choices. They don't lead by emotion, they lead by vision. They know that not every insult deserves a reply, not every act of aggression deserves an equal return. They understand that true influence is built not by domination, but by demonstration. When a missile is launched, the world watches what happens next. But what they remember is not just the retaliation. They remember who had the strength to lead differently. They remember who had the courage to step back when everyone else rushed in. They remember who put the future above the fury. Restraint doesn't always feel good in the moment. It can feel like swallowing pride, like holding a volcano inside. But it is often the most necessary act of leadership, because it says, I have power, but I will use it wisely. I have the right, but I will choose the responsible path. I have the means to destroy, but I will choose to build. Wisdom listens before it speaks. It studies before it moves. It protects more than it punishes. It asks not just what is possible, but what is right. That's the kind of strength the world needs. Not just strength that breaks, but strength that bends without snapping. Not just strength that roars, but strength that steadies the room. Not just strength that wins the moment, but strength that preserves the future. It's the kind of strength that requires depth, humility, and patience in a world that moves fast and forgets even faster. Those who carry it may not always be celebrated immediately, but they are the ones history remembers as wise, just, and strong in the moments that mattered most. So let's stop writing stories in ash and rubble. Let's write them in light and truth. Let's not just ask for peace. Let's live like we deserve it. Let's fight like it's worth it. Not with weapons, but with wisdom, because the world is watching, and so are our children.